Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kara Burrell. Sometimes I go by Nuanto. Sometimes I sit down with Kyle Bishop for a second time. Hey Kyle.
Hello.
Hey, you guys remember Kyle? I had a video with him a couple weeks ago that I put out about just getting rid of the BS sometimes when you're ready to move on and you're ready to unlearn some things and relearn how to learn. I think that's how I described last video. And it was super popular, huh?
It was
You had some
surprisingly
good...
popular. It led to people reaching out and having questions. So we thought that we'd expand on that a little bit more this time.
Nuance how.
I have, of the people who come for coaching through the deconstruction process, this is one of the pieces of what I take people through that they have told me has been the most helpful for them. And so I figure bang for buck, if you're going to listen to something, it may as well be super useful. So that's what we're going to try to do today.
Come saddle up and have a discussion with us about
shadow work.
Shadow work.
Yeah, Jungian psychology.
So give us a little introduction about, you said that you do life coaching in the last video. Kyle is a fabulous life coach. And a lot of people, obviously, when they're leaving any kind of big transition, like transitioning out of the church, I remember finding myself like I was a computer without an operating system. I didn't know who I was or how to find out things about myself outside of who I was that the church told me I was.
Exactly. So for myself, and it sounds like you and a lot of other people that I've spoken with as well, religion wasn't just something that you did, it was something that you were. And so when you lose it, it's not like you're just losing some superficial label, you're losing a part of who you are. And so when people critique it, when people question it, it doesn't feel like they're questioning just some ideology that's not part of you, but rather it's like they're questioning you. They're attacking you by attacking the belief or by asking uncomfortable questions. And so there's this part of us that never really gets to question, that never really gets to be kind of separated out. And so because it's so important to us, our egos want to protect that at all costs. And so there is no questioning. There isn't really, and if there is questioning, it's very superficial. And any answer will do when it comes to allowing our ego to be, okay, that's good enough. Cool. That solves the problem, even if it doesn't. And so it leads to a lot of cognitive dissonance and this constant rubbing inside of you that doesn't really, it doesn't allow you to be yourself. And there's so much of you that you don't get to explore. And shadow work is one of the ways that people can reintegrate. Well, first of all, they identify the parts of themselves that they've lost to a religious ideology, some form of religious indoctrination. And then they can start reintegrating those parts of themselves back into who they are.
Yeah. And the first kind of concept that you were explaining around having your ego so tied into an organization, into a religious structure, that you aren't just a member, you are that thing. And your identity is the armor of God, and you put that on, and you have too much of who you are is tied up in that identity to ever be able to question it. Because those pillars, that's your entire mental health, that's your entire family, that's your salvation. Questioning any of those pillars that keep up what you think is you, what you think is your community, what you represent as a good Mormon or whatever religion you come from, that's a heavy ego place to come from. And so it takes, what kind of person would you say it takes to even be able to start actually analyzing and questioning those pillars? Because I know for me, yes, like everything, once I questioned those pillars, I didn't have an identity after that. After I knew who I was only in reference to who the church told me that I was.
Yeah. I think what it requires of people, and the reason why it is so challenging to do shadow work, is it requires radical honesty with yourself. So it's not just...
Yeah, we talked about that last time a lot.
Yeah. Radical honesty is, if somebody can get to that point where they care more about what's true than about what feels good. And that sounds so trite to say, but when you really are facing down the barrel of your lifelong indoctrination and everything that has been your comfort, your rock, your solitude, the place you go when you feel sad, to even have that questioned as maybe that's not true. Your brain is so far from wired for that kind of a discussion, or even quietly walking with yourself into those thoughts, that it's very rare that somebody actually does that. And it takes an extreme amount of pain for somebody to finally be open to it. Like a lot of people's, like we talk about how your shelf can break. As you grow up, you have all these different shelf items, these different things that, you're kind of like, well, that's interesting, or that doesn't make sense. And you put it up on the shelf. It takes a lot of those things, even if one of them alone, it makes enough sense for you to realize there's something really wrong here. We're like, nope. and it takes a bunch of shelf items for it to eventually just go boom.
Yeah. And I also want to add to that, people often get it confused with thinking that a lot of people, I know 16-year-old kids I went to high school with, and they were Mormon, but they just left the church and they left it alone, and they didn't have any problems leaving. They just like transitioned out into normal life perfectly fine because they were already smoking cigarettes back, in the janitor's closet in 10th grade. And I think the confusion comes where people try to understand why the faith crisis journey is so important, is because you have to understand that there are just certain people who wrap their identity up in the church more than other people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a very unnuanced person and you don't actually tap into the empathy and the truth and the honesty of what's actually happening, there are varying degrees of orthodoxy that different people in Mormonism live. And I lived a really strict orthodoxy. And so a lot of my identity was tied up in it. And that's why so many of that fell. But it's because, like a lot of people, my identity was first and foremost tied to my integrity, which was kind of taught with me in the church. Sometimes that's kind of a controversial thing to say, because I think your integrity is just like a God-given, like from the universe kind of thing also.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it all just wraps up in what type of Mormon were you? Were you a very conservative Mormon and you have a lot tied in your identity?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ideas, a whole swimming pool of so many ideas that have been swimming around in your head for so long. And it gets to a point where, you have a devotion to the integrity that that those ideas are not actually serving you anymore, not serving the people maybe in your life or the people that you love anymore. And you're willing to actually have some radical honesty that you need to replace those. But not everybody is like that. I just want to clarify, not everyone ties up their identity so much in Mormonism. And so this kind of deconstruction isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
It's for a certain type of person who really believes the church with all their heart,
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most cruel things.
Girl over here.
Yeah.
Did you believe the church with all your heart?
Absolutely. I was so in. I was the person when I left, people were like, what? Like the Bishop family, my name's Kyle Bishop. So the Bishop family was like the family that was so in and so like wildly in that, when anybody in the Bishop family left, it was a lot more like what than it was about maybe other people. Because my family was like there was no playing catch on Sunday. There was no, movies. It was like read your scriptures. It was so strict. It was like a contest to see how much joy you could forego to show Jesus how much you loved him, which is obviously a very toxic dynamic.
That was kind of my brand of Christianity. I was like, how long can I read the scriptures until I want to die? But I have to do it till it's painful. So were you like seriously faithful all the way through your 20s too?
Yeah. I mean, like this is kind of one of the embarrassing things to admit, is that sometimes you stayed on the gospel road because like you just weren't that attractive. And so temptation just didn't knock on your door as much. And you're like, yeah, I'm here because I chose to. It's like, Kyle, we see you. There wasn't a lot of
I have something to confess to. Insert picture of me all through high school in braces. And
it was rough times.
It was like not very rough. The seas were very calm. Nobody was a knocking either.
One of the most tragic and really heartbreaking things about people who deconstruct is that the ones who tried their hardest are in the most pain as they leave. It's like the more you took it seriously, the more pain you're in. So you invested so much more into it. And it's like every step you took into it, you have to take back. So people who didn't go that far into it, it's like, it was hop, skip, and a jump. You're out of there like, well, that was weird.
Like converts to the church have a lot easier time deconstructing because they didn't live so much of their life wrapped around this idea.
Well, so much of the toxic stuff that you don't realize is being pumped into you wasn't pumped into somebody who joined the church later in life.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much stuff that I think only as a child it can go so deep.
So you pulled me in today because you wanted to talk about shadow work. What is it? It's in a TikTok or less. And why should people do it? And what is the benefit of it?
Got it. Okay. So every one of us is born into a family, is born into a neighborhood, a country, and inside each of these different groups that we identify with, there's a culture. When you adhere to the culture, even if that culture changes and you change with it, you get the love, you get the validation, you get the attaboy, the pat on the head, and everybody loves you. Now, if you deviate from what that expectation is, you risk not getting the love, the validation, the approval, the acceptance that we're so hardwired to crave and to need in order to be emotionally fit and healthy. And so shadow work, let's talk about the shadow. So the shadow is the unconscious realm where parts of yourself that don't fit in with what you're expected to be, what you're supposed to believe, what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to not do, what you're supposed to say, what you're not supposed to say. All of those parts that don't agree, you kind of repress them into what we call the shadow. And it's something that you don't necessarily know that you're repressing, which is why shadow work is such a complicated thing, because there's things that you don't know, and then there's things that you don't know that you don't know. Known unknowns and unknown unknowns. And unknown unknowns are much harder to be able to visualize and to grapple, because if you unconsciously repress a part of yourself without realizing it, how do you know it's gone? You don't. And what eventually what ends up happening in life is that you start having little fires, like little triggers that come up, or things that, it's like that your response is so visceral that you kind of wonder, why did I respond? It was such an emotional thing.
Right.
And in such an emotional way. And it's kind of a clue as to what is in your shadow. So women who are raised in religious, conservative Christian circles. So
my ears are burning.
Yeah. So there's a lot of there's a lot of roles that women are supposed to play, and a lot of roles that women are not supposed to play. One of the expectations for Mormon women, a lot of conservative Christian women, is that you are a giver. And giving is something that you have to do, because there's somebody who needs to be able to take. And so there's this constant women give, men take. And that's obviously there's so many different levels of this that we could go into, but to keep it kind of we'll skim the surface for a minute here just to give the example. There's so many things that women they don't get to participate in. They don't get to have a voice. They don't get to go do all the activities where like the young men
Let me finish what you're going to say. Like, you are going to have kids. That's a given.
Mhm.
You are going to accept the calling and the other calling and pick up wherever you can. You are going to be expected to be really just like on board with whatever they tell you to do in the temple, because you're hooked to this guy's hand pulling through the veil. And from this point forward, you obey him as he obeys the Father. Hello. Excuse me. What now? I have to give my consent to do who now? What now? Hey. So I just thought that butting in was the right thing to do, because you're explaining what women do in the church. And I thought I should probably
to keep us from having a mansplainer reduce your experience in the church, which is valid. So
no. All right, go on with your thought.
Okay, so these women, they don't ever learn to say no. There's no boundaries that are there, and over time, this give thing, this expectation of, even if your cup is empty, pour something out, find something in there and give it, because you're supposed to be like this savior figure who sacrifices herself so that everybody else can be happy, even though you're dying inside, and then just keep doing that until you die. And then don't worry, your happiness, your eternal reward on the other side will be given to you, and will justify all that pain. You'll be like, man, I'm so glad that I didn't falter and stop being Mormon, even though the pain was so severe and my emotional health was so non-existent that I cried myself to sleep every single night. So
I don't even think that I was even, no offense, smart enough to know that something was off. That's how in it I was, where I just assumed my role was that. And so you can't feel pain if you think that this is life. Yeah. I just didn't know that it got better. Does that make sense?
No, you bring up an interesting point, because a lot of people when they deconstruct, they start being like, man, how was I so dumb? How did I not see this? And the truth is, it's not a matter of intelligence at all. If you can show me an 8-year-old or just a kid, any old kid, and try to sell them something that they give up the love of their parents, but I'll give you this, they'll never take you up on it, because they were so wired for love.
They really are liking Legos right now, and those sets are expensive.
Maybe they would sell you for like the new Star Wars big Millennium Falcon Lego set.
Yeah.
But they would regret it eventually, and they'd be like, I want my mom back because now I'm hungry. And so even if it does work, it won't last very long. So I'm sticking to my guns. I'm right about this. I'll die on this hill. The point is, we're so wired for love, we need it. And so to be like, oh, these kids are just so stupid because they need their parents' love. It's like they're just wired that way. Yeah. And they're so undeveloped that you can't possibly expect that there's something, like, oh, don't, sure, if you don't go to church anymore, your parents will be upset, but it'll be totally fine. They'll be like as soon as the love is gone, the child breaks. and it just is really challenging for them. And so to be like to look at somebody who was raised in a religious indoctrination where their whole wiring is to get love. It doesn't matter if it's true.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at all. Look at any
not.
religious tradition, no matter how insane you think it is. And there are children who go, yep, Muhammad rode on a flying horse, went to the moon and split it in half. Checks out. You could tell a kid anything. And as long as they get that love that they're used to getting, they're going to believe it. They're going to go on with it. Because it's like, well, like my parents don't know. Like they're the parents, and parents aren't supposed to know. It's their job. And that really is the level of complexity that a child can understand at that point. So to say they're dumb is,
Thank God my parents are so quirky. Like the things my parents pumped into my head, like religion was always there, but my parents were having me like memorize movie quotes and read books for money. Like I have Flanders Fields memorized because my dad just forced me to like recite poems all growing up. And like if I answered the phone, he forced me to say, till I was like 10, my dad forced me to answer the phone. My dad was reading in his library, he would force me to say, "Father is in the library and cannot be disturbed." Is there some trifling message perhaps? Like these are the things my parents pumped in my head that I got love for doing. Thank God, because I even though I was very orthodox as like a teenager, as an adult, I'm really grateful that at least my Mormon household, it really depends on the orthodoxy in which your family kind of adheres to, and what is required for that love. Mostly it was just me like watching old westerns and stuff with my dad, and that filled his bucket. He's a simple guy. Thank goodness for that. And here I am today, semi-functional. So starting on shadow work, what are some of the most fundamental things that people need to onboard as they're undertaking this?
So I think you have to understand how your brain is actually wired. And the reason why we want to understand how it's wired and to understand that objectively is because there's a lot of things about the way you are wired that you would never have chosen. That like if you were going to design your own brain, like this is how it's going to function, you never would have chosen this way. An example of that is that we are not wired for truth. We are wired for love, acceptance, positive emotion. And so whatever we need to do in order to get that love, like we were talking about with the kids, you're going to do it. Your brain is wired to do that. And it's kind of interesting because there are certain things that your subconscious mind will pick up on. And it's kind of like certain ideas float to the surface on their way up to the consciousness. Let's say it's up here, like it's an ocean. Once you get to the top and you're out of the water, this is the conscious area where you actually are aware of what you're thinking and what you're doing. And you have some form of control over that. So let's say you're in church and you hear something about, you're like, why about people of color were not allowed to have the priesthood. And that thought starts going up to the surface. Now, your subconscious mind knows that once that thought gets into the conscious mind, it's going to cause you pain. And so it's like it stops it. It grabs it, it ties a rock to it, and it goes back to the bottom. And your brain is always trying to do that because it's trying to help you, because we are wired for survival. And the way that the brain actually gets that done is that it labels anything that is painful as death. And the reason why is because pain equals damage. And if you sustain enough damage, you die. So in a really kind of oversimplified way, your brain labels anything that will cause you pain as death. And it's like, we don't do that. And so it's trying to help you. It's like your subconscious mind is a really inadequate first day intern who's trying to help the company as much as he can, but he's causing fires everywhere he goes. And it's like, you're the CEO and you start realizing, man, there's all these fires and like these issues that are coming on like in this business. And it's like your subconscious, this little intern is going to meetings on your behalf as you and making decisions.
The idea that your brain depends on giving the best faith interpretation of whatever information is coming in, snuffing down whatever is negative, especially on the height of survival things. Some things are not super negative when you're just choosing between two valid options, like what kind of like cheese to put on your sandwich or something. Right. But I was thinking like there are certain things that are born into our survival that it's impossible. Ask any mom. No mom has ever thought that their baby is ugly, because you survival, you need to think your baby is the cutest baby in the entire world. Like there's certain instincts within ourselves. Would you say that's like along similar lines, that like anything that is not serving your survival that you know you're going to have to do to be able to get through another day as yourself and in your environment, you have to give yourself the best feed possible. that's going in.
And if it doesn't, it gets naturally selected. And that's how we've evolved over time to become more prone to not dying, which is the whole point. Because when you think about it, all of the programs that your brain can run, and just imagine how many there are, the number one program is do not die, which is very simple and obvious and sensible considering, if you die, none of the other programs matter. And so your brain is always trying to assess threats, but it's doing that with the formula that we talked about. If it's going to cause me pain, it's death. Now, for example, let's say that a husband and his wife are out, and this wife is looking at her husband. They're at the bar, and he starts, chatting it up with some girl, and he's a little bit flirtatious, maybe puts a hand on her back, is something is going a little bit past what they have agreed on in a monogamous relationship. And if that's the rules of the relationship, that should be what is adhered to. And so let's say that she sees this happening. Now, for her to go and open up the conversation, like, hey, like, are you cheating on me? It's a very challenging thing. Basically, you open up that can, the husband could get very mad. He could end up leaving. Oh, you're so crazy. You're so this, you're that.
I just played it through in my head, and he was fine with it.
Yeah. As the wife sees that this is happening, she's faced with a decision. One is to open the uncomfortable topic of, hey, like, are you still happy with me? Because even asking that question opens up the door for him to say, no, I'm not. And that's crushing. And so your brain is like, don't even open up that door. Like, why would we even have that conversation? And so your brain just like, nope. And it tells you like, no, you've misinterpreted. You just start gaslighting yourself because it's like, no, I must have, misread that, because if my husband's cheating on me or he doesn't love me anymore, then that's too painful of a reality for me to actually be able to function and understand. And so I'm going to just, right over what that was. It's like you saw somebody's true colors, but you're going to paint right over them with much prettier colors. So that way you get to maintain your very blissful delusion that nothing is going on. And then you wait months, you wait years, and then you've lost them completely. And then you hate yourself and you resent yourself because there's a part of you that knows I should have opened the door to that question and I didn't. And now I'm suffering and I just have less time now in my life because I waited so long to actually ask the tough question. And that's how we're wired. And you can take that principle and apply it all over the place. And I think a good place to start is any thought, realization, conclusion that your brain can come to that you wouldn't want to be true. Your brain is much less likely to even conceive that that's a possibility. And is that thought that, oh no, maybe this thing starts rising to the surface, your mind is wired to hide it from you. And so when you realize that your mind plays tricks on you, it's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to keep you alive by avoiding pain. But what it's doing is it lets you survive, right? That's what the mind wants you to do. But it doesn't even conceive the concept of thriving. And so it just makes all these very immature, half-baked decisions on your behalf without you knowing that. So once you realize that that is how your brain is wired, first of all, it's a hard thing to accept because who wants that reality? It's like, and if there was a God, why on earth would he ever have made it this way? Why would we not have been wired for truth over comfort when truth is the thing that we must adhere to in order to get back to his presence?
Line upon line.
Yep.
Discounting psychological peer-reviewed research paper after discounting whatever floats your boat, Mormons.
Exactly. It's so that's one of the things where, and when I say that, a lot of people are like, well, my brain's not like that. That's you're exhibiting right now that is the true principle.
Really? Because I was going to tell you that my brain wasn't like that.
Because mine's totally different.
Mine's
like for some reason that I, of course, have no way to explain or defend. But
I'm just
magic,
like different. I think though there is an aspect that's beautiful about leaving a high demand religion like Mormonism, that so many things are tied to it, and then you do question all of those so many things.
Yeah.
And so when I left Mormonism, I was willing to look at as many things as possible and do kind of what you talked about. It's like, I have a negative opinion of this. Let's start here and say, all right, what are the feelings that come up? What have I been taught about these things? Is this true? Is it propaganda? Does it just feel more comfortable to believe this? Or what's like the uncomfortable truth that I might not want to hear, that I should be ready to hear because I have like my integrity wants to align with what's true over what feels good because I've already done that for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it. So I think there's a lot of people in that deconstruction space who are kind of hungry for it to unwire their brains.
Yeah.
Like they've been wired for so long.
True. And I think a lot of those people get to that place after a lot of years of doing the exact opposite.
Right.
Because it's like, we would like to believe that, like, no, I've always just wanted the truth, you know? But it's like, what if the truth, it's like, what if every guy or girl, whoever, like whatever your fancy of sexual partner is, could actually give you the 1 to 10 on how you look? Would you actually want to know?
Yeah.
Because it's like,
yeah,
maybe not.
6.6.
It's like, yeah, 6.6.
That's what I came up with. My husband would never tell me. He says, you're a 10, baby. You're a star. All right. Most people wouldn't want to hear it, is what you said?
I think
I have gone out of my way to ask gatherings of men. I worked at a summer camp when I was 19, and there was only like 10 male counselors and like 80 girl counselors. And I was like friendly. I was like, I have enough of a masculine personality that I got along with the girls and the guys. And I was like, bros, come on, tell me, you guys. I was like, have you guys made a list of the most attractive girls at camp? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, read me your list right now. And they went over, and I was 8th on the list. And I was like, just got my braces off. I was like 19-year-old Mormon girl. I just thought I was like super awkward and stuff. And I was like, 8th? I was so grateful out of like 8. 8. 8 was the highest. I was like winning Miss America. That was like coming in like the top 10 of Miss America to me. I was like, you think me? And ever since then, I've been riding that high.
Yeah.
I put on my lipstick every day, and I'm like, get out there, 8.
Why people would and why people wouldn't. It depends on the degree to which, how much pain are you risking? That really is the question. Because for some people, like let's say you weren't the 6.6 and you place yourself as more of a 3. 3s have more pain to experience by having that number 3 confirmed to them than an 8 does. Because if
Wait,
you're
let me update my
already...
number. I picked 6.6 before I dyed my hair blonde. 7.6.
7.6. It got worse.
It costs hundreds of dollars. It better be worth a decimal point and then some.
It's like, I may be prettier, but now I'm poor. You gotta factor that in now too. It's like,
yeah, ain't that the truth? The higher you want to go on the scale, more money you gotta hawk over.
Yeah,
the beauty industry knows it. All right, what do you got for us?
Okay, so to wrap up kind of the points that we've been making, there's a quote.
Who's the quote by? Carl Sagan?
Carl Sagan.
Wait, repeat that again. Say, Carl Sagan's here to read one of his famous quotes. Say that.
Carl Sagan is here to read one of his famous quotes.
Hi, everyone. Carl Sagan here. One of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back.
Carl Sagan, ladies and gentlemen. Carl Sagan. We've barely even touched on what shadow work is and how to do it. But there's no point in going into shadow work unless you are willing to go into it with a radical level of honesty, which is you going against the way that you're wired. And so until we do that, there's not much point in... Like,
I'm a 7.7. I can't lie to you guys any longer. All right, so tie these ideas together with the concept of shadow work and why these all are integral parts of it.
Self-awareness is the beginning to all healing. And if there's certain things that you have deemed as too painful, as I just can't go into that, it's too much, then you can't really heal from it.
Are you talking about like traumas or just identity ideas? What constitutes that?
I guess both. Anything that you have to go into, anything that is like actively causing fires in your life, by ignoring it, you have to, like, ignoring a fire is no way to put it out. And sometimes you have to find some way to address what that is. And obviously you can do that in a way that's not like total just mind destruction, like using psychedelics, having, a coach, having a trainer or somebody who can help you.
Because a lot of people could have fires going off in their life. And if that's the chaos that is your norm, you don't even recognize it as a fire. There's not an alarm going off. So people still need help understanding what is actually like normative behavior. And from the religion that I came from, like you can have a perfectly healthy Mormon marriage and things, and people think that they're perfectly happy.
Yeah.
But a lot of us see fires all over.
I guess the question is, how do our fires manifest themselves if we don't know that they're burning?
$1 million question. You don't know that things were traumatic until you have like a certain trigger that hits that could be coming like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
That's not and could completely blow up your entire life. There's certain traumas or things that you think you've gotten over, or you think certain things didn't affect you until you're months, years down the road past a deconstruction.
Yeah.
And you didn't even realize that those were inner fires.
Yeah. So shadow work, there's this quote that I think it was Carl Jung who said it. He said, the thing you most need to find will be found where you... Okay. The thing you most need to find...
Yeah, natural. I've never once heard Carl Jung's voice.
He's the only thing we have of him on video is he's so old that he's just like, and he's Swiss, so he has like this accent that I couldn't possibly try to replicate. I would just destroy myself. So one of the things that Carl Jung said was that the thing you most need to be conscious of is the thing you least want to be conscious of. The thing you most need to find will be found where you least want to look. That's how you find what's in your shadow. And the shadow is constantly trying to manifest itself to you because you have these traits that are part of you that are useful and beautiful and that want to be heard. But because you don't dare allow them to come out because for whatever reason, society or your family doesn't like that particular trait. So when it comes out, you get penalized. And so you say, okay, trait in your cage. It's trying to come out all the time. And it is actually manifesting to you all the time. And it often comes up in things that you don't like about other people. Like, for example, let's say that growing up, I had a father who was a total asshole. He wasn't just assertive. He was over the top domineering. My brain will kind of tie those two things together. Say, to be assertive, which is not a bad thing, is the same thing as being an asshole. And so I live a life where I constantly get smacked in the head by the 2x4 of somebody who doesn't understand how to be assertive. I'm walked on. I'm only a giver. I can never take. I don't set boundaries. I never say no. And so this thing, like the pain in my life is telling me where there's something in my shadow. Because once I can reintegrate, being assertive again and just consciously be able to see that that is not the same thing as being an asshole and that there is a healthy thing there, I can go, okay, that's right. Like there's a lot of utility and beauty in this whole being assertive thing, and me not having it, me not letting it out because if I let it out, then I'm an asshole, just like, my asshole father, then I don't want to be that guy. And so therefore my brain has made it wrong and immoral for me to be assertive and to state my boundaries and for me to have healthy expectations of a relationship and how I'm treated. And so it's the pain, it's the thing that you don't like about other people. You can kind of look at what that is. So if somebody is radically honest, they have to acknowledge that there are parts of themselves that have been repressed.
I think everyone was conditioned just by, your parents and your society. And there's going to be, like you said, obvious things where you were conditioned for the love of something, but your love of something and tying yourself to it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true or good for you.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not as much of a black and white issue as you had labeled it for your own survival growing up. And so you have to analyze a lot of pieces. One
of the biggest challenges to being radically honest with yourself is that your mind doesn't want to admit that you have broken pieces of yourself that you need to go explore. Because if you have to go explore those, again, you're hitting back. The ego is going to hit back and say, no, we don't do pain. We don't go there. We put that in the shadow so we don't have to look at it anymore. And so it wants to cover up that there is something down there. And because it's easier just to say, no, all the problems in my life are there because of all these other stupid people, and not seeing how that we are contributing to our own suffering.
That's perfect. I get that. Okay.
Because if that's a harder thing, because I think in life it's easy to realize that there are villains out there and that villains do bad things to people. But what is really hard is to admit the possibility that maybe you're the villain in someone else's story. That's not a fun thing to consider. Because your brain doesn't want to admit that, like, maybe I've done things to people that like have really deeply hurt them, but I don't want to own that.
This podcast is like just so about somebody else.
Exactly. It's like, this is
Just
about other
kidding.
people. This is not about anyone listening, because anyone listening is obviously...
Everyone listening here is like, you guys are in the club. You guys get it. You guys are... This is for people you have to share it with.
Yeah.
Like, you might want to look at this. Everyone here is cool, though.
Okay, we have more Carl Jung quotes. So one of the really cool things that Carl Jung said was, by not being aware of having a shadow, you declare part of your personality to be non-existent. Then it enters the kingdom of the non-existent, which swells up and takes on enormous proportions. If you get rid of qualities you don't like by denying them, you become more and more unaware of what you are. You declare yourself more and more non-existent, and your devils will grow fatter and fatter. So we're afraid to explore the shadow, which is why it's so challenging, because who wants to go like deal with all of that? Like, hey, like, what are we going to do today? It's a nice Saturday. We have all this time. Let's explore our demons. Like, let's do that. Let's go to our deepest, darkest pain.
And you guys ever done a mushroom trip at a blackberry farm? Purging demons. Digesting blackberries.
Actually, psychedelics are one of the most useful tools in shadow work, because it's like you go into all of your scary places with this shield of euphoria.
I'm for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Life-changing.
Psychedelics can be amazing. They're not for everybody, but they, they can be useful.
And if I may say so, when I had my mushroom trip at John Larson's house, if you know who that is, up in Oregon on the blackberry farm, I was meaning to do a lot of like reparenting, like inner child type work. And I've been meaning it. I've been putting off it. This book that I've been mentioning a lot, given to me by Sam Shelley, it's called Inner Bonding. It's the framework in which she focuses a lot of her life and a lot of the people that are in my friend group and my husband. And I needed to read the book, and I needed to do some inner work on some things. And I wasn't even able to start reading the book or thinking and processing ideas until I had my mushroom trip, because I was able to finally do what you said, like really get radically honest, put down some walls, and be able to get to work and just like purge demons for 6 hours straight. And I was exhausted, could barely walk the next day. But sometimes I'm the type of person where I realized on my mushroom trip, I was like, gosh, Aaron, I have my husband. I was like, I have so many pillars up with so much mental stress of so many balls in the air that I'm keeping going at all times. Like you're talking about with those things pulling different things down, and just like I can only have a certain bandwidth for so many things, and doing anything that has a lot to do with processing, I have to really go full force into, or else I feel like, well, one of those pillars might like wobble and shake or something. I have to go like car crash full into it.
Yeah.
Mushrooms.
Yep. Carl Jung said, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Rather than climbing up a ladder seeking perfection, we are unfolding into wholeness. We are not trying to transcend or vanquish the difficult energies that we have considered wrong. The fear, shame, jealousy, anger. This only creates a shadow that fuels our sense of deficiency. Rather, we are learning to turn around and embrace life in all its realness. Broken, messy, vivid, alive. It's like...
multifaceted.
Yeah. At church, what we were taught was like, chase the light, deny the dark, deny the dark. But there's so much in this darkness that it's fun, it's mischievous, it's spontaneous, it's sexual. Like so many of these things are so beautiful and add so much color to life. But Christianity and a lot of other religions have just said, no, that's evil.
You puritanical psychos. Let us have our cocaine covered poker tables and edible underwear. You guys wouldn't get it unless you did shadow work.
Yeah.
You'd know what's on my
you
Amazon
have to be
shopping
in the shadow
list.
work club. So.
All right. Multifaceted quote, because life is multifaceted and you're missing out on a lot of things if you're not able to do what?
So like if we have a shadow, what are we missing out on?
Yeah. What are you missing out on?
Okay. So when you don't explore your shadow, you're basically just living your life for somebody else in order to get their approval, their praise, their acceptance, their validation. So you never really explore who you are. So you're never really the main character in your own story. It's like you're just kind of
God's will be done.
Yeah. You turn into
praise be to Jesus.
An inferior, frustrated copy of the people around you. It's like you can't hear the music, but you're expected to dance, and damn it, you're going to dance. And then you just feel like you're this dancing monkey, and there's no self-exploration. It feels hollow and dead inside.
I don't know. I've raised my hand in Relief Society and gave some really great comments before that no one else thought of. I wasn't dancing as a monkey. I was dancing as like another type of encaptured jungle creature.
Bingo.
And I thought I was really cool for it. I didn't feel like I was at all a dancing monkey. I was like, I'm going to say what's on my mind as long as it doesn't ostracize me in any way whatsoever at church. My voracious hand raising, well, it will serve my ego. I'll make sure that it falls in line with the systems and the conditioning of all of the people in this room too. You know?
Bingo. So reasons why not to wear the mask and just be the person that people want you to be. Brene Brown, who's an expert on shame, she said, caution, if you trade in your authenticity for being liked, you may experience the following: anxiety, depression, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. And I think that before, like, those are the things that bring us to the point where we break. And at that breaking point, we finally are willing to say for the first time, if this isn't true, I actually want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to come to, because that's where the radical honesty comes in, because there's so much like work that has to be there before you even begin shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not honest, if you're not willing to be self-aware and to own up to some, some stuff, there's no growth there for you, because you're just perpetuating this mask of like, no, I'm not that bad. Like, I'm good. Like, chosen, the scriptures say so. So it just feeds all of this ego-driven nonsense.
Yeah, I would put it in terms of like, I always like to say that so many of the problems that I had staying in the church were around the idea that I always started with the presupposition that the church is true.
Yeah.
Because the story that had been sold to me about Joseph Smith couldn't have any way other than what we've been told possibly have gotten this book that is so amazing and blessed so many lives. And look at all this like really good PR that we're putting out about happy families.
Yeah.
So you start with the presupposition that certain things in your life are true because of the narratives and the love that you get from believing those narratives, right? And it's really that radical honesty place where you're looking at what are the presuppositions that have always just been given to me throughout my life about my role, about what's true, about who I am going to be in debt to, which is the type of kind of Mormonism and Christianity that I lived, that like I am a sinner, I am imperfect only through these certain acts and these certain rituals. And is that connection, am I going to be made any, I'm going to be saved, I'm going to be in God's good graces, have the Holy Spirit with me at all times. It's only through this prescription to serve something else, and it has nothing to do with actually if it's at all tied to my individuality or my personality. It's always a presupposition that feeds into a grand narrative that makes your family happy.
Yep. So if you presuppose that the Harry Potter universe is real and you just accept that, then how to exactly perform the Cruciatus Curse is a totally valid question, but it's in a realm that you don't exist. But it's like they start in the branches instead of at the bottom of the tree and build up. They just start up there, where it's like, we're just going to presuppose, God is real. And like, that's such a massive,
that is such a massive one. You're like, so much of my testimony in Mormonism was, I know for sure God's real. Obviously, look at how we're here. No, duh. And then you add on, okay, the rationale. If he had a church, would he have prophets? Yes. All right. I'm not going to look into anything they've ever said that makes me uncomfortable. But you're like, if I ran a church, I guess I'd run it kind of like this, and I'd have this organization. And a lot of the church, the way that the church runs, like it looks pretty shiny and happy from the outside, but there's some corpses rotting underneath. But they can play a good game of showing a good show. And if you just, you feed in enough positive information like that, your presuppositions can get you 30 years old without questioning it all.
Okay, so basically what we've done in this episode is kind of lay the foundation, the groundwork that has to be present in order for you to start shadow work. There's a lot to go into, so we're obviously going to turn this into a series.
Yay!
And we'll hit into what shadow work is, how you do it, and all the ins and outs of shadow work, which there are many. So
love it. Kyle's a good friend of mine. I love the way his brain works, and I love the advice that he gives. And he does life coaching for a living. And I have a lot of life coaching friends, and I absolutely love this guy over here for the work that he does. So if you liked the things that we discussed today and you want to jump into more ideas around shadow work, and you're in some type of like faith transition space, I guess you can head over to your website, which is beyondgodreligion.com.
Mm-hmm.
Book a session, a life coaching session with Kyle, if that's what you're into. But you also have what else on your website that people could check out?
So there's a few resources, like being able to kind of broach the conversation of, hey, I'm no longer into your family and friends. That's a very hard thing. So I kind
go
of
read that.
created a
Still haven't told
guide
them.
for some tools, because that's something that I help people do a lot, because there's a lot of people leaving and there's a lot of trepidation around that conversation, because it can go really well and it can go very poorly and kind of forever taint a relationship. And so it's, of all the conversations you have in life, that's one you want to do correctly. At least it's, maximize your chances of that going well. And there's a little bit of preparation that if you put in, it can make it a very relationship strengthening thing, which you wouldn't think would be possible considering the news that you're giving them, that, hey, I'm going to hell, but I want you to be cool with it.
Yeah. Resources, tips, and also you could book a life coaching session with Kyle. He's super dope. And we're going to turn this into a couple more parts. If you haven't seen the first part, go back and watch us talk about undoing your brain from some bullshit. And I'll leave a link in the description below, and all of the links to Kyle and where you can find him will also be down below. And yeah, look forward to another couple parts on this, but I know you're just itching to keep talking to this guy, and he's only a phone call away. So book a session with Kyle. If that's what you need in your life, if that's the kind of transition of your faith that you're looking for, I think it's really worth the money. Very few things are really worth the money, and things that help your mental health and help you establish yourself, it's kind of worth its weight in gold, personally. Like I said, I don't need it because I'm already I'm baked in terms of done on healing myself. I'm pretty much set. So thank you guys for tuning in. Love to get the Nuance Home message out to the people. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to put a link to a new donor box button that I have. So if you like this content, I want to try to make something at least once a week on this channel. And if you just want to keep it running, click the button to the donor box and you can fill in a little bit of cash to throw me that way, since this is my job and it's a really great job to have, and I benefit from it. And I'm just grateful that I'm in a community of people who love and support the work that I do. And I'm hopefully going to be making the types of videos that people in the faith crisis community need, meaning just pouring out more validation and lulz and wisdom, and hopefully it'll be received well. So please comment under this video, helps out with the algorithm. And also you can head over to my Patreon and subscribe there for a couple bucks a month, and there's a couple cool benefits over there. I also have a merch store, and I love your support on any and all platforms, TikTok, all of the ones. And I'm going to stop waving my hand in the air like this because that's how I list things, thanks to this bottle that kept me nice and quenched. Anything else you want to say?
I think you hit
Anything else you want to thank?
I think you hit all of it. So thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Hey, thanks for watching that video. If you want to see me keep making long-form YouTube videos on Mormon topics from deconstruction to Mormon history, please consider helping make my channel sustainable by heading to DonorBox for a one-time or reoccurring donation, or Patreon or Venmo. Like and subscribe, and hit me up on Instagram if there's a topic you'd like me to cover next. And I promise to keep rolling out awesome content weekly. If you want me to go away, do nothing. Thanks.
Nuance Ho.